Imagine having access to a tribe of mentors consisting of some of the best tech leaders in the world, people you may have never heard of, but who in just an hour, you'll know their unfiltered career story, the bets they took, the decisions they made, where they failed, and the lessons that they learned along the way. Welcome to the What Makes You Tick podcast. Hi, I'm Tolu, aka The Podfather, and I am the host of What Makes You Tick.
And I am Richard Washington. I own Tick Talent, and we sponsored this week's podcast. Tolu, we're going stateside. Who have we got on this week?
So we are on a bit of a Pavilion spree at the moment because we have Josh Pearson, who actually does a mini Pavilion ad. So maybe we should send this to them. But what did you think of this week's episode with Josh?
Yeah, so again, another brilliant person that I've managed to meet through Pavilion. I think I just took a chance and connected with people when I first joined, and Josh was one of those nice enough people to have a conversation with me, which to be fair, most people have. And he's just this really down-to-earth guy. But we were talking about this pre-recording, right?
Yeah.
And he's got that quiet confidence that's very appealing.
Yeah.
And you can see why he's sort of been noticed as someone who has ability to step up in his career and ultimately become, VP and very successful within leadership roles too, because he kind of exudes that I would follow you and listen to you kind of vibe, but without any of the kind of like massive attitude, huge charisma that you might associate with some people who are more famous in that space, Grant Cardone. So there's a load of humble things in here. I know we've talked about this already, but for people who are just joining now, what are those things that you remember most from your conversation with Josh that you love the most?
So when I asked him what makes you tick, he was like, I hate losing more than I love winning. And I was like, I can hear that. And that's what a lot of the like hyper competitors like Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, that's what they're like. They're like, I hate losing more than I love winning. And he just talked about some of the big lessons he learned from losses. And yeah, he's just really, really down to earth. But there's a lot of really good stuff that he has to say. And he's had a really interesting career. So yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation. And I love Americans as a general thing. So I love their competitive nature. So it's always good to talk to another American.
Yeah, go Bucks.
Yep.
Go Bucks. Cool. So I think people are going to love this conversation. So without further ado, let's roll the VT.
Josh, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. So first question is, Josh, what makes you tick?
What really makes me tick, what drives me is I hate losing. Most people love to win. I'm a little bit opposite of that.
Okay.
And I had this conversation the other day that, when I have success or I do win, I don't remember it as much as when I lose. Like something that I've lost, even a deal that I lost 10 years ago, still sticks with me. So that's kind of what drives me. And then, so I have a family, 3 boys. So just really showing them the right way to do things. That really, I want to instill that in my children. So do the right thing and don't lose.
Would you say over the years that you've won more than you've lost?
Yeah, I would say that that's a fair assessment. I'd say, the larger wins are what stick with me. The little wins along the way have been key, but those losses, like I said, they stick with me. So I'm not that I'm a pessimist and think about that all the time, but as soon as you asked that question, what immediately went to mind was what losses I had.
Yeah.
But if I were to stack rank them, I would say I'm about 70-30 at this point, wins versus losses.
That's pretty good. Would you mind telling me about your biggest win and your biggest loss?
Yeah. So biggest win was quite a while ago, but it was a key victory. I was with a company. Do you want me to go into specifics as far as?
Yeah. If you can. Yeah.
Okay. So I was with Adobe. This is quite a while ago, and I was selling the desktop solutions there. And, I had a peer of mine who was selling the server-based products. We were able to identify a need within Homeland Security. I was selling public sector at the time.
Right.
And we were able to basically sell an enterprise agreement to all the sub-agencies based upon building a champion at, DHS headquarters.
Yes.
So that was a massive deal. I mean, game-changing deal.
Wow.
As for the company, public sector portion, and then obviously for me as an individual, that was a feather in my cap at the time.
Yeah. Amazing.
Unfortunately, I wasn't making as much as I am today, so the commission was not as significant as it would have been. But
Yeah.
that was one of those deals that was a learning lesson. It was like, this is how you build big enterprise deals. It was like you cultivate a champion, you identify, all the stakeholders. So there's 22, maybe 23 stakeholders that we had to get buy-in from each
Wow.
sub-agency, build those, and then get everyone to agree. So if you can imagine trying to get, that many people to agree on something,
Yeah.
It's quite a sell. So
Yeah.
that was an amazing feat. At the time, I think it was like it was significant. It was over $84 million at the
That's
time.
very
So
significant.
massive deal. So that one, and then there's been some other ones along the way that have just been really good things that I built upon what I learned there. As far as losing, I don't want to go into the specifics of the deal that I lost, but the lessons I've learned.
Okay.
So yeah, because they could listen to this, that customer.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
They
Of
would be
course.
too happy about that. But so there was an opportunity. I was working. It was a large opportunity. I worked it cradle to grave, and this was as an individual contributor, not as a leader. And what I failed to do, and like I said, this is what I learned, and it sticks with me, is I didn't have a deep enough relationship. I didn't go wide enough within the account, so I thought I was covered. Last minute swooped in, so this is a deal at the end of the year that I thought, hey, I'm not only going to be at my number, I'm going to be in accelerators, and I'm already cashing the check. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, okay, get my car, whatever it might be. Last minute, a competitor came in. They had a better relationship. It was a golfing buddy. And the decision maker just said, we're going to go with this one versus your solution, even though we had the technical win. We had everything you could check the box on. So that stuck with me. I was like, okay, well, Josh, if you ever, and I never speak in the third person, I'm just, if I
talking
ever
to yourself.
think that I have, if I ever have the deal in the bag, then I'm wrong. So that's what sticks with it. So it's not done until it's done.
It's
so
done.
Keep going, keep building, don't assume that, hey, it's in procurement, we're good to go. Talk to the procurement person, figure that out, build that kind of relationship. And that can only benefit you. It is that this is our jobs and our careers to build. So, who knows what would have happened if, and like I said, this is what goes back into it. If that deal would have closed, where would I be today? Right. I learned a lesson, so it's painful, but it's like, okay, but that could have been a launching pad to something else. You know what
True.
I mean? And you never really know where life is going to take you. So do your best every day to try and win the individual battles.
Yeah.
Because you don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that it can kind of work both ways, because I think that sometimes you learn, like the painful lessons that you learn when you lose, the lessons when you win are not as strong. So you don't know actually where the lessons that you've learned from that loss might help you in an even bigger deal down the line that will take you to even better places. So for me, it's like sometimes when you lose, that feedback that you get, if you take the lessons, it's like for the future, that's just banked away.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, if you look at it so I like to use sports analogies when I'm thinking about sales and life and all those things. If you have a team that's winning constantly, you don't see the warts. You don't see what's wrong.
Yeah, winning covers all, basically.
You're winning in spite of these things. But when you're losing, it's magnified. Why things aren't happening. So then you can really start to understand, oh, this is kind of, if I fix this, that will help me to win.
Mm.
And you think about that in sports. It's like, hey, the New England Patriots a few years ago were the best team, and they were winning championships left and right. They had a terrible defensive points, terrible offense. Nobody looked at it because they were winning. Then all of a sudden, you took away one key piece, which was their quarterback, Tom Brady, and the team just looks terrible. It's like, okay, well, everybody missed, the opportunity to understand how great this individual was because they were winning.
Yes.
But without that, there was a lot of pieces that were missing that were never addressed because they always counted on that one thing happening. So that's kind of that sports analogy there. And I'll probably use that another sports analogy during our conversation.
So is sports where your kind of competitiveness came from?
Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, I grew up in a neighborhood, a blue collar neighborhood. So it was just my sister and I. Parents were divorced when I was younger. And sports were always kind of like in the neighborhood. It was, you're either doing football, basketball, all those things. And I always wanted to win there. So I remember this is vividly when I was probably about 8 or 9. I grew up in a neighborhood. Everyone's playing basketball. I'm a shorter guy, not like 6'2", 6'3". You can't see from behind the desk here. But so it was never really that great at basketball. But they had this thing where this group came into the neighborhood, and they said, "Hey, we're gonna do all these kind of basketball type drills and stuff, and you can win things." And the one thing was, if you could hit free throws, you'd win this Walkman, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm dating myself here because there's
Walkman. I know what a Walkman is. We're okay.
But so yeah, I probably never made a free throw before in my life before that day. I ended up winning, and I made about 15 or 16 in a row, and everybody was like, "What the hell, Josh? You suck at basketball." And I was like, "But I wanted that Walkman.
Yeah.
So I was gonna do whatever it took to get that Walkman."
Yeah.
So
yeah.
that kind of thing. And it's things like that are very competitive, and a lot of people will see me as more laid back, and they're like, "Oh, Josh isn't that competitive," but it's like I almost have to dial it down because I am so competitive internally.
Yes.
Like I want to win all the time. I think, like I said, with the lessons learned from losing, I just don't want to repeat that
ever
because sometimes it's very painful.
Yeah. Agreed. And so you mentioned you came from a blue collar background. So how did you transition from that into sales? Like, what was your motivation for getting into sales, which is much more of like a white collar career? How did you make that transition?
Yeah. So great question. So I actually paid for college myself.
Wow.
Was a psychology major. So, and it was more learning about how to solve problems and those kind of things. I was at Oracle. So that was kind of my first job out of college. And I was in the support renewals team. And granted, I was making okay money, college graduate, yada, yada, yada. And we had these sales reps, the IR team. And essentially, they were booking all these deals and things like that. And I'd have to help write contracts for them.
Right.
So they say, "Hey, I've got this opportunity. We need an order form. We need So I would do that, and at one point, one of the two of the managers said, "Hey, Josh, can you come in and do a presentation to the group?" So I had to get up in front of the group. There's probably 75 to 100 sales reps in this auditorium, and I'm walking through the process. I'm saying, "This is what you need to do to ensure that your deal closes." So after that, they said, "Okay, well, would you shadow on some of the calls to make sure these guys are doing it?" And I did that. And then that light bulb went off on my head. I'm like,
I can do this.
I was like, these guys are making 5 times what I'm making, and I'm doing their job. So that's kind of where it really transitioned. And as soon as I really understood that, hey, I have the aptitude to do the sales position. I understand the process. I understand how to get things done. It was more, how do I fast track myself to that role?
Yeah.
And so that's where things really took off for me. And I went into another group briefly at Oracle, and then went to Adobe and was in field sales and off and running.
So you mentioned about kind of transitioning and pivoting your role. So what were some of the practical things that you did to, whether it was prepare yourself or get positioned to be able to make that move?
So some of the practical thing, I think it was more so meeting with the people that had the role,
Mm,
some of the reps, some of the managers, and understanding what I needed to do.
mm,
And I've done that throughout my career as well. So some of the practical is, I'd say, shadowing,
mm,
understanding best practices, what the expectations are in that
mm,
role, and then having those conversations and aligning what I'm doing to say, hey, Josh is capable of doing it. He's already doing it in some cases.
mm,
This isn't going to be a heavy lift for him to come in and do this.
mm,
Um, and I've done that, like I said, throughout my career. I always say, and I've talked to the guys that report to me, and I said, figure out where you want to go and align
mm,
with the person that's doing that job, and
mm,
then attach yourself at the hip of that guy.
mm,
So I did that at Adobe. The guy Mike Connor, um, he was a senior guy, not senior, but
mm,
I said, hey, you're making X. And people say
mm,
it's kind of a faux pas or gauche or whatever to ask how much people are making.
mm,
I I don't think that way. I say that's where I want to be.
mm,
What did you do to do it?
mm,
And how do I get there?
mm,
And so he shared, some things, and I said, okay, well, this is my target moving forward. This is
mm,
where I want to be. So this is
mm,
what I'm driving towards.
mm,
And ultimately, once I got to that, and I said, okay, well, what's that guy doing?
mm,
How do I get to there? So it wasn't like I kind of get status quo and relax. I'm like, okay, I've made it. I'm at the top of the mountain. I think
mm,
there's always a place to go, and
mm,
um, that's kind of where I focused. Like, so I was an individual contributor. I wanted to
mm,
get into leadership, so
mm,
align myself with a leader who I admired, and said, okay, what are you doing? What are those steps? Then I said,
mm,
okay, I wanted to be in like VP of sales. What am I doing here? So I did that alignment. I
mm.
joined groups like, are you familiar with Pavilion?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I
But for those
joined
who aren't,
Pavilion.
tell people a little bit about Pavilion.
It's a community of sales professionals and leaders, um, that you join. There's a membership fee, but
Mm,
it's very collaborative. There's a
mm,
CRO school which I attended
mm,
and graduated in May of last year, I believe it was. But it really gives you the template on how to do that job, because uh,
mm.
a big thing in the industry is fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of people are struggling to figure out how to do these roles, and it's like, okay,
Mm,
well, why don't we discuss this in an open forum and say,
mm,
okay, let's share best practices.
mm,
And there isn't typically a CRO school,
mm,
where you get a diploma. So what am I supposed to be doing on a daily basis to
mm,
progress my career, and then
mm,
also help my company?
mm,
Because in most cases we have equity in the company.
mm,
So that was one of the things I joined, and they have monthly meetups here in the DC area.
mm.
Just a lot of content. There's a Slack channel, so if you want to, I'm doing a commercial for these guys now. So, um, but yeah, so if you want to, uh, you know, have a conversation. I was just looking yesterday. Somebody was having an issue with HubSpot and how they could pull out data from
Mm,
HubSpot to report to
mm,
the board.
mm.
Right? If you didn't have a forum like that to discuss, where do you go?
Where would you go? Yeah.
So
Mm,
and that's what's the really cool thing about that. So my ultimate goal is to move into the CRO role.
okay.
Um, it's more of a title thing at this point.
Mm,
At my current company, I manage most of those, most if not all of those responsibilities of a
mm,
CRO.
mm.
So what happens after that? I'm going to start looking at the next step. Like,
Yeah.
is it CEO? Is it president?
Mm,
Whatever it might be.
mm.
That's going to be kind of my next stepping stone.
And so you mentioned that you wanted to transition into leadership. So how far into your career was that, and what made you want to start transitioning into leadership?
I can tell you the day or time frame I was at Adobe again.
Okay.
What? And this is probably going to sound bad. This is just me personally, but I remember, and I'm not going to mention his name. There was an older sales guy,
Mm.
probably mid to late 60s, still carrying a bag, and he just looked miserable. And I
Mm.
said, I don't want to be that guy, right?
Mm. Mm.
So how do I do that? And I started looking at the people that were in the same age range and what were they doing? Um, you
Right.
know, because technology, as we get older, this is just the reality of this situation. We don't
Mm.
keep up with technology as much as we did when we were younger.
Yeah.
And so it's more of the fundamentals of leadership at
Mm.
that point. Um, that's what you rely on more than the speeds and feeds, bits and bytes.
Mm.
So that's where it kind of drove me. I said, okay, well, you know, I'm a younger guy in the game right now. Let's really cut my teeth. Let's get as far as I can, and then kind of transition into that role as I get older. Like
Yeah.
you can't just say I want to move to VP of sales and make it happen. You actually have to
Mm.
earn it.
Mm.
So that it took time for me to do that. And there's not a manual on how to do this,
No.
on how to make your career work. So it was a lot of experimenting. If
Mm.
you looked at my LinkedIn,
Mm.
my
Yeah.
career history, there's been some movement there, and
Yeah.
it's because, hey, this isn't always what I thought it was going to be, or maybe it's just not a right fit, or hey, there was a stint here that as soon as I got there, I saw like there's something shiny over there, and I'm like, oh,
Okay.
that's where I want to be. You know what I mean? So those things happen.
Mm.
But as far as the leadership thing, I've always been um, like a leader. Like
Mm.
it's not like I've put a hat on, said I'm the leader now. It's just like, hey guys, let's go do this.
Mm.
This is our goal, and I would rally the troops, and we're
Mm.
off and running. So it's something
Mm.
it's kind of ingrained that you can hone.
Mm.
Um, so that this is what I want to do in the future.
Mm.
Um, I really like not just leading to say leadership or those kind of things. It's
Mm.
more about empowering my team.
Yes.
The biggest kick I get out of this is seeing someone, you know, mature
Mm.
and, like, hey, we hired this guy. He was kind of,
Mm.
let's just say a C player, B, whatever it might be, and
Mm.
really just grow and blossom into the role. And
Mm.
then if ultimately they could take my job, that would be key. You know what I
Great.
mean?
Yeah.
Because then
Yeah.
it's almost like you're building someone and building them up in a team to ultimately take your job. If you're
Mm.
doing a good thing,
Mm.
that's the right way to do it.
Mm.
Another sports
Mm.
analogy, right?
Yeah.
So you, as a head coach of an NFL team, you hire an offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. You
Mm.
work with them. You
Mm.
see them; their offenses take off, right?
Mm.
And this is happening in the NFL right now. Then what happens? Then they become head coaches. Then
Mm.
you're competing
Mm.
for a job, unless you
Mm.
become like a president at some company. But
Mm.
it it's not a competitive like, oh, I don't want this guy to win.
No,
You
it's
want
healthy.
this guy to
It's
win.
healthy competition.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm.
yeah. But I mean, I was like, when you see somebody, succeeding and everything that you work together to build that up, that's like the best part of it.
Mm. Mm. And what were some of the lessons that you learnt along that journey to get into VP? What were some of the tough lessons that you learned along the way?
Um, you can't always be friends with, and it's hard because I like to make friends. You can't be friends with your team all the
Okay.
time. So those are some of the difficult things. And you're going to be looked at when you're the leader. There's going to
Mm.
be people that have differing opinions. I mean,
Mm.
and when you're wrong, they're going to point it out,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And when you're right, they're going to say, "Well, I did that."
Mm.
So
Mm.
those kind of understanding the dynamics of the team, and then you know uh, across the company, understanding specifically within sales, but there's a lot of animosity towards sales in some cases. If you're looking at the technical side of the house, they say, hey, sales doesn't really do much, yada, and it goes. So understanding those, and those are the lessons that it's like, hey, we're not all going to be friends here. Let's build a common respect for each other, one another. Let's build this together. And that's really been my focus. Another thing I would say is always read your comp plan, and ensure that
you know what's in there.
Yeah, and make sure that what you're being told is actually in there. So that's a lesson learned.
Because the contract is king. The contract beats everything you've ever been told.
Oh yeah, because when either way, it's going to go back to that paperwork.
Yeah. I think there's a really interesting thing about what you said about you can't always be friends with your team. And I wonder if that comes at a certain level of seniority. So like in my last role, you start to hear things the more senior you get that you can't actually share with your team. And there becomes a bit more of a distance, actually, like I can't actually go out and like be drunk with my team or whatever it is, because actually like at that level, that doesn't really work. So do you think it's a level thing, or do you think it's more of a situational thing?
I think at a level, you're privy to more information that you can't share, but also situationally, because, if you're too friendly with one of your reps, that might be viewed as, by the other reps as something. So it's like, you almost kind of have to separate yourself, be one of the team, one of the guys, but you also have to separate and take a step back. And I think it's also beneficial. I'm thinking of an example here where we had the team together, and I wanted to be one of the guys, right? I wanted to hang out and do all those things.
Yeah.
And I said, this is a moment for me to step away. And I took a step back, and I heard after the fact that it made them a tighter group, because now they could actually bond as a team without me being there. And I was like, that's perfect. I don't, I would love to be friends, and that's what we are as humans. But I would much rather the teams, solidify, build, and they can collaborate and learn from each other. And then when I'm saying something, it's not me talking down. It's like, hey, everybody's communicating across the board there.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that people kind of talk about with leadership is a little bit lonely, because you can't have that same camaraderie that you used to have when you were like part of the team. So what are some of the things that you've done to kind of combat that loneliness that comes sometimes with leadership?
I talk to a lot of my peers. So, peers not necessarily within the industry, in cybersecurity specifically, but just, across the board, like, what are they doing? And that's really builds that rapport. So it's not as lonely because you're not on an island. A lot of times I'll talk to my former colleagues as well.
Okay.
So there's a group of us, we worked together at Akamai in like 2014 to 2017 is when I left. And we have a chat group. It's been 10 years, 7 years since we worked together at least.
Yeah.
Talk on a daily basis. But then we kind of communicate there. What are they doing? What are they seeing? And there's no, how do you say it? We bust each other's BALLS. I'll say it all the time, but it's more so that's kind of that open forum. We're like, hey man, this is kind of a bad situation. What do you guys think? And obviously we're not sharing company secrets or information, but just how do you deal with that? And then also, I'm married, so I talk to my wife. She's my sounding board, and I'm her sounding board. Vice versa. She's in real estate, so I talk to her about challenging moments with my team and customers, and she does the same thing. So I think you just have to have someone to talk to, because you can easily go down a rabbit hole. I was reading the other day about like and you can also get stuck in the like LinkedIn leadership vortex echo chamber,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is just like you can go down rabbit holes and I should be doing this and that and this.
Yes.
It seems like a lot of consultants are trying to sell you on something as far as how you
Yes.
can be a better leader.
Yeah.
But I think there's free advice, and if you go to church, maybe your priest can help you, but it's just someone understanding the human aspect of your role and how to fit together, and that's kind of how I do it.
That makes sense. And I think there's some really, really good things in there, because even like what you said about former colleagues, I remember when I got a head of department role, my old head of department, we could have very different conversations now that actually I'm at the same level as him. And he was like, this is great that we could actually just talk like this. We had a really good relationship, but there are still things he couldn't tell me. So actually the former colleagues thing was really, really powerful for me.
Yeah. And when I was talking about that, that moment where I kind of stepped away from the team and they really bonded, there was an exact moment. So my manager, Keith at Akamai, he built the team. We were all in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC, and he was from Boston. He flew in for the day. We did some training and all this stuff, and we went to, we're like, okay, we're gonna kind of separate. So Keith went back to his room and he gave me a call and he said, "Hey, what are you up to?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm here with the team." And he was like, "Huh." That kind of like, that sad moment. But I mean, I think he also looks back at that. That was that bonding moment.
Yes.
For him,
Yeah.
he built the team, and then we were all,
Yeah. Yeah.
hanging out, doing what guys do after work. And he was just kind of like, "Damn, I can't be one of the guys now."
I know. It's such a tough moment, but it's also such a necessary moment. It's such a necessary moment. So one of the things you mentioned was about, you tried quite a lot of different things in your career. So like I was looking through your LinkedIn, and it's a really, really interesting journey. So what were some of the big risks that you took? Maybe some that you would take again, some that you wouldn't take again. What were some of those big risks that you took?
So I guess the biggest risk, so my career started out in public sector. So I was selling into, federal civilian for years. And that was my background. And the biggest risk I made was around the time I went to IBM. So IBM, I left Adobe, which was a stable place. I went to IBM, which is also a stable place, but I went to an acquisition, which was a company called Cast Iron. So it was like essentially a startup that was just being acquired by IBM. And then also shifting from, so it was big company. So I was Oracle or Adobe, and kind of IBM, but this small little startup. So it was kind of a deal. And then going from public sector to commercial, so commercial enterprise. So it was a big learning curve. And I think I did it at the time because I was getting complacent and comfortable. And what I like, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, but when I get complacent, I almost like to shock my system, like throw cold water, like we're not doing this. We got to keep going. So that was kind of one of the things. And what I really learned was you don't need these big companies. I mean, obviously it's helpful, but that's where I really kind of got the mindset that, startup early stage companies can really do things that large companies can't. People always say like turning the Titanic or something like that. But you can pivot. I was talking to a customer the other day and they said, "Hey, we kind of want this feature functionality. How long would that take? 6 months, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "No, we can do that in a 2-week sprint." That's the benefit of a startup is that, hey, we can on the fly do things if there's revenue behind it, essentially.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
So that, and then thereafter I went to Akamai. So that was kind of a shift, and it was more web performance, kind of then turning into security with bot management, web application firewall. And I did really well there. Was there for about 4 years, but then started to get that itch again. And that's when I went to the company Instart, which was going to a competitor, kind of an unknown within the market. Can I do this again? Can I do what I did? Was it Akamai? Was it me?
Was it me?
Was it a
Yeah,
company?
love that. Yeah.
So going to that startup, and that was a big cold water shot again, where I learned that some of it is that big company, some of it's me, but it's kind of a reality check. Like I recall customers that I was talking to, and I picked up the phone when I was at a new company. They're like, "Who?" And I'm like, "Hey, we met on a weekly basis." You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's just kind of that gut check that, hey, it's not about me. It's
Yes.
in some cases it's
Yes.
how can I benefit them? And I couldn't at that point. So that as another thing that it would kind of force me to change. And then going to my previous company that was acquired was a seed funded company, so it was all hands on deck. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't just AEVP, SE. I was the janitor. I was doing everything, and we all were. It's not just me. And that's kind of the reality of this situation, is just understanding that, hey, this is going to be a wild ride. It could work out well. More than likely, it won't. But hey, this is your lottery ticket. Make of it what you will.
So you mentioned a couple of times about, when you're feeling complacent or really comfortable. How do you identify that within yourself? Is that something that you're always kind of checking, or is it suddenly you might wake up one day and be like, oh, hold on, I'm in that place again? How do you know that? Because I feel like there are lots of people who might be in that space. So how do you identify?
I don't know. I mean, it's more of just a gut feeling. It's just like, and like I said, maybe I'm a masochist. Like, hey, things are going well. Why don't I throw a monkey wrench in this? But so it could turn out well, and it could not. It's just one of those things where I like. It's not chaos. I'm not going to say chaos, but I like change.
Challenge.
I strive on that, and when something's consistent, I'll go back to my wife again. She has a calendar that's consistent. It doesn't deviate. My calendar, like if I showed you my work calendar, changes all the time. I'm moving things around. I'm doing things all the time. It's just the kind of the nature of the way that I operate, and then the way that I am. And if I started to get that stagnant calendar, I'm just making an analogy here, in case my boss is listening. But then it's kind of like, okay, well, now I need to shake things up and do things different. And you know what I mean? I wish I had a better answer. It's something within me that when I know, and then I'm like, let's do something different. Let's try this a different way.
That makes sense. So as you went along your leadership journey, you would have had to build some teams. So what are some of the things that have been really key for you in building successful teams and identifying the right people to be part of your team?
Yeah, I mean, so typically what we all strive to do is to identify that A player, that persona that everyone talks about. And ideally everybody would like to have that. That's the person you want to hire. That's going to be your flagship rep. I really also enjoy taking the B players. It sounds so negative, but taking a B player and really making them or elevating them into an A player. They have everything you need, the tools in place. They just need to be sharpened. So that's what I really excel at. And a lot of times is, I work with someone who's like, okay, well, you're doing all the right things. You've got all the right activity, but it's just not turning into revenue, or it's not being productive. So what do you have to do differently? I like working with that. It's kind of that problem solving. Another thing I do is I do a lot of puzzles. So I like to mix and match the pieces to try to make it work. And I think in building a team, you're putting all those pieces together. Ideally, you want the A player, B player, C players, there's a time and a place for those, but it's a lot of work to elevate a C player to an A player.
Yep.
It's much easier to it's much easier to focus on that B player and elevate them to A, and hopefully you have that A player in place that you can trust is doing the right things. And with A players, what I really focus on doing is giving them a platform to really highlight what they're doing. I think that's what motivates most A players. And then understanding, hey, if that A player wants to become a leader, how do I help them do that? And those things are key. And it's just back to the psychology thing is understanding what drives individuals and trying to help them get to where they want to be. Because I wish I had a mentor coach. Like I've had ones that I identified along the way, but if I had one on my shoulder
at the beginning,
the devil and angel throughout my career, I think it would have been really beneficial to say, this is the path, Josh. This will help you become a better leader.
So what you mentioned from turning B players to A players. Are there any like common themes, or like it's usually these three things that will turn a B player into an A player?
Yeah, so I would say one of the key things is understanding activity versus the right activity. So a lot of times B players are just run. Well, that's just wasted energy. How do you focus that? You know what I mean? How do you? And I know this is going to be counterintuitive because I just talked about the calendar thing, but really focusing, and being detail oriented on these accounts, understanding the player. So I think building that out, saying, okay, this is where I'm going to target. This is where I'm going to spend my time. These are the key players I need to work with. So getting that focus and not just, hey, I'm going to do this demo to this demo to this demo to this demo, because it's not a numbers game. It's specifically in cybersecurity, it's a relationship game. It's like you have to build that trust. So where do you spend your time to build that trust to ensure that you're going to get these opportunities that will close? So it's a mindset shift for some of the B players. And I identify a lot of the B players that most of them are gym rats. I'll put it that way. So they've already got that structure in place, and they're like, hey, 8 o'clock, I'm doing this. You know what I mean? They have that kind of.
They're ready to work hard, and they do work hard. Yeah.
Yes. So it's like, okay, and I can think, you can't see my physique, but I'm not in great shape. But so like a leader could be like a professional trainer. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you are doing sit-ups and crunches and all that, but you should be doing them this way. And if you do it this way, you're going to get better results.
Yes.
So that's
100%.
what I try to do. I think just someone who can communicate with the C-level. And I talk to my guys about this all the time. The dirty secret is a lot of these executives, that you're trying to get in touch with, C-level, CISOs, whatever, they're people just like us. We kind of put them on a pedestal and think, oh, this guy. But I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it, that you get them outside of work and they're just talking about like soccer for you. Probably you're in the UK.
Yes.
They're talking about football. They're talking about just normal guys. And in some cases you're like, what? So just
this is it. Like,
that these guys are guys and girls are human. They have the same things that we do, but and understanding, and this is going to be like another song, what makes them tick.
Well done. You brought it back in. Nicely done.
I think that's really beneficial. Don't be afraid. And I think a lot of things. One last thing with B players, specifically, was you're going to make mistakes. Nobody's perfect. Learn from your mistakes and be able to pivot. When you say something stupid on a call or in a meeting, how do you recoup? How do you react to that? And that's one of the biggest things. Is like, and we're all going to do it. I do it all the time. And then it's like, okay, now I need to rebound, figure out, get my bearing, and get back in the game. Another sports analogy, But I think that's key, is that those things, it's like just learning these little tips and tricks along the way. Some people have it out of the gate. Some people need a little bit of coaching. But I think we're all capable of doing that. It's just, where do you want to be and what drives you?
Agreed. And I think even just with what you said about, approaching C-suite people, it's like, it comes back to that thing that we talked about earlier about separation, is that sometimes like the C-suite people have had to separate themselves from their team or whatever it is. And sometimes that creates that perceived distance and that perceived pedestal, but actually like they're people who just want to connect with other people. Right. So it's that thing of actually like, they do want to connect with people. If I can add value to them, they would love to actually connect with me. And it's understanding that thing of not being afraid of that distance and actually closing that gap.
Yeah. I mean, that's perfect. Yeah. So they've all probably been in our situation, wherever you're at today. I mean, most C-suite people are a little bit more senior, but they've been in a junior role where they're like, hey, I'm not sure if what I'm doing is right. You know what I mean? So they've had those feelings, and they may still have them today, but just connecting with them on a human level. Obviously you treat everyone with respect, but just understand that, hey, don't be afraid to have the conversation and connect as a human.
Exactly.
If they decide a different direction as far as a solution, at least maybe you've made a connection you can network with, or see if you're in the same city, you see them outside of things, or you see them at a sports game, you're like, hey, how's it going? And they'll always remember you.
Agreed. So just as we close, we normally do what we call Tickfire questions. So I'm going to ask you a few questions, really quick fire answers. So the first one is, what's the difference between a good leader and a great leader?
Oof, man, these aren't easy questions. So a great leader his team will follow him wherever he goes. That from my perspective. So they'll follow him into the fire and, trust that he knows what he's doing, and, they bought into it. A good leader, there'll be the respect there, but it's like, okay, that's not a guy I want to follow in the future. I'm following him today, but not in the future.
You like the pressure, because that was a very good answer. Very good answer. So next question is, what are the top 3 things you look for when you're hiring someone?
Top 3 things. Depending on the role, well, obviously they have to be familiar with the industry that we're selling into. There's cybersecurity, so they have to have a base level understanding of that. They have to be able to communicate the value of whatever they're doing. It doesn't have to be our solution today. They don't have to give me the elevator pitch. But when I say, hey, well, what do you do? If they can give them an elevator pitch about themselves, then they could do it about it. Everyone can be trained as far as that. And then that kind of drive, you know what I mean? What happened? Not what time do you get up in the morning, but how do you start your day? And when you understand that, then you're like, okay, well, this guy is a driven guy. Or girl, sorry. And that drive will take you a long way. So those are kind of the 3 things I look at.
Cool. And then last question, what's some of the best advice that you've been given?
It's always kind of listen to yourself. You know internally what's right and what's wrong. There's so much noise out there, whether it's LinkedIn or, some other thing. Ultimately what's right, and do the right thing. So yeah, it's kind of listen to your gut, because your gut is right. And I haven't always done it, so hey, we make mistakes. But you will, like I said, when you lose, you make a mistake, then you look back and you're like, damn it, I should have listened.
I should have listened.
Myself, I knew it.
Yeah. Josh, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and there was a lot of really good insight in there. So thank you so much for your time and for being on the podcast.
All right. Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening, and we will see you on the next episode. Thank you guys so much for listening to the What Makes You Tick podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed shooting it.
Absolutely. There's so much value in hearing a tribe of virtual mentors telling you their career story and what it took to be successful. And that's the outcome of this podcast. If you like this and you've learned something, we also have a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn called Growth Magnet, which is everything to do with scaling tech startups, performance, and leadership. So we'll put a link in the show notes. Make sure you click it now.